All right, cool. So I met all of you, first being Justin, and then this nice chain reaction that happened because I'm working on a project called Athletify. We are a stats and highlights LinkedIn style platform for youth athletes. And if you know about Trace or Veo or some of these like Huddle, some of these like field side camera tech, we have our own cameras, we have our own dashboard where the stats make it there. And then the problem that it solves in the marketplace is it is a retention tool and an engagement mechanism for the teams and clubs. So it's very interesting, Matt, when you talk about like, when families want to find a new club, like that's exactly where we started this, is because we saw clubs can easily dissolve. And I want to talk to you more about that. So I have talked a lot in the past about the things we're looking to figure out are the stats component. So people were very awesome in suggesting those. I'm going to put out another question to this group. If people know folks working like camera tech, any sort of camera stuff, those are valuable connections too. Doesn't even have to be sports, but ideally, that crossover is there too. So that's Athletify. That's how I met Justin, and that's why we corralled this group and found the Profluence crossover. So thanks again. Keep the camera stuff in mind. But with that being said, if somebody has a question about anything, want to do a quick intro for Sal. So thanks again, Sal, for being the featured speaker tonight. There's round robin intros. I thought we could get it done in like 20 minutes. We went double, but it's okay. We were a little faster than the usual. So thanks for the feedback on that stuff, guys, from prior meetups. But I want to introduce Sal Filardi, our featured speaker tonight. He's got a really interesting background. We met through the Profluence community. Justin and I hosted our first in-person meetup. Sal came all the way out, like an hour and a half drive from Westchester. So I was able to learn more about his background and hear his insights, and is up to all these cool different projects, some of which we'll hear about today. He's a special forces veteran who's in the Green Berets for 10 years. So definitely a nice blend of like leadership and communication things that I think you see a lot of crossover in the business world. So really cool things there. And he now serves, people want him to be like the ops guy for their project, right? So put the Green Beret in like the fractional COO role, and then I know you have like a venture capitalist advisement side. So welcome, Sal. Thanks again. We're really excited to have you tonight. So you can take it away and go ahead, Sal.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate it, and honored to be here. Thank you guys for spending some of your time with me tonight. Like Jake referenced, there's all these tie-ins from what I learned in special operations as an embedded advisor to foreign militaries and helping them kind of grow and develop and become self-sustaining, to what I have found now as a home in the sports tech world, where it's the same kind of problem set, right? What do you do when you have limited time, limited resources, and a problem that is, relatively speaking, dynamic? And what I found is that the tools that I used to answer those same questions when I was working with my team in West Africa or Europe or the Middle East are the very same tools that are helpful to sports tech founder teams, to investor teams who are trying to wrap their head around where to go with their advisory to their portfolio companies, and even, less venture-backed startups, more just like, regular old small business, Main Street capital type stuff, that are wanting to scale, but don't know where to go because they feel like they have all these options and don't want to leave anything on the table, right? So what I'm going to share with you guys tonight is a tool that my mentor showed me, and that I have used bunches and bunches of times to do one thing very easily, very succinctly, in the same way every time when it comes to decision making. This tool is called the Impact Frequency Matrix and has been used historically at all sorts of levels of the military, right? So my mentor used it when he was doing a postmortem or an after action review with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, talking about where they wanted to invest money in the billions across the Department of Defense in order to drive towards like future force readiness, right? And I used it on my 12-man team, just as I used it on my, as a staff officer in a 100 and something organization, and to foreign militaries at the senior governmental level, like the heads of state level. equally as effectively and sometimes in the same day as like the tactical frontline level. So let me see if I can't get this screen up.
You should. Do you see the button now? All
Yeah, I got it.
right, great. Perfect.
All right. And you guys let me know when you can see that.
We can. This looks cool.
Okay, badass. So what we're talking about today is this tool called the frequency impact matrix, right? And you're welcome to follow along if you have like a notebook or a sheet of paper or something and just do this with me because I'm going to throw out some military examples because that's what's fastest for me to kind of explain it with. And then we're going to delete those and we'll use some stuff that's a little more relevant to this room, right? So the impact frequency matrix is a simple XY that looks like that, right? And along the bottom, you've got frequency. And along the side, you've got impact. And at the apex on frequency, you've got always. So that's a lot, right? And then you can kind of pick whatever time period you want, and it comes down to like never, right? So maybe that's always, most of the time, sometimes, rarely, whatever you want it to be, right? And on frequent or on impact over here, impact for me is measured in how bad is it for your team if you screw this up, if this fails, if this doesn't work out. And down here at the apex, you've got catastrophic. So, right, really bad. In this case, really bad is going to be a plus. And then you've got, serious, bad, not that bad, and we're going to be just fine, right? So everybody kind of got it from how the chart's set up, just like a little thumbs up on the screen, be perfect. Just go like that. All right, cool. So as you're thinking about all the things that you can do or want to do or are trying to decide between, I like to represent those things just in a circle bullet on the side, right? So for me in a military context, what I'm going to explain is through the lens of a combat patrol, right? You're going out with the guys, you're walking around, maybe you have a planned objective, maybe you're just doing a presence patrol, maybe it's I know somebody's out there, but I don't know where they are, right? Combat patrol. So one of the things you got to do for that is shoot. 2 would be move. 3 would be communicate. 4 would be medicate. And let's say 5 is call for fire or close air support, right? Those are 5 things that are like big, sexy topics that you got to train on all the time, right? So we're going to represent each one of these as a bullet. And now we're going to run them through our filter, right? So let's start at the top, shoot. Well, let's look at the frequency for shoot. How often on a combat patrol do you get in a direct fire weapon systems, guns, firefight? Not every time, right? It doesn't always happen. Depending on where you are in the world, it might happen more or less frequently. So for the sake of this, let's call it most times or somewhere between most times and sometimes. And how bad is it if you can't put timely and accurate fire on whatever the threat is? Well, maybe the threat's far away. Maybe it's not a real threat. Maybe your, engagement criteria that day is to break contact, right? Like there's all these variables that could go through as like logical variables. But in the case of this, we're going to call it most of the time and like serious if you can't do it well. So there's one. All right, move. How often are you going to go out as a unit, maneuver through an area, and come back home? Every single time. That's the whole point of a combat patrol, right? And how bad is it if, somebody gets cut off from the pack or, you lose contact or you can't control one of your elements that you sent off to another place? Well, shit, that could be catastrophic, right? 100%. So that's going to go down here. Here's 2. All right. Communicate, relatively similar, right? What if you're spread out so far that you can't use like a visual or kind of a direct communication system, or you need to talk fast or relay information fast, right? Like for me, communicate, that's pretty huge, right? I would probably put that down here as well for 3. All right. What about medicate? Hey, you don't get hurt every time. Preferably, if you've done good risk mitigation, you don't get hurt very often, right? So let's put that maybe down here at sometimes. And, if you do get hurt, is it always, is it necessarily like always within your control to like fix everything right on the spot? No, sometimes you got a medevac and, whatever it happens to be, right? So if you can't 100% take care of the problem internally, it's probably not like super catastrophic because in the military, you've got all these additional resources. So let's throw that up here. Here's 4. And now close air support, call for fire, right? Like, well, I mean, in reality, that's a very, very limited resource, and not every patrol gets it unless you're in a super, super dangerous environment. And if you can't do it, there's all these other resources external to your unit that you could add as an attachment in order to get it done. So if you can't do it, it's not great, but it's like not the worst thing in the world. So very rarely happens. And if you're not like excellent at it, the pilots kind of help you out, right? So as we're looking at this, we see this kind of scatter plot of all these points of these things that are important to us. And you could think, if you put yourself in my shoes and you are in this very intense, very like elite military type of environment where my guys, the members of my team, their specialties are shoot or move or communicate or medicate or call for fire. So each one of these guys is like super passionate about one of these things. And each one of these guys is like, we're absolute trash at this and we need to train as much as we can to get as good as we can. Because if we're not better than we are now, it's this huge risk and I'm not going to feel comfortable and yada, yada, yada. Right. And what this tool does, this tool allows us to come through and look at how these things plot logically, where everything that's kind of down here in this happens most of the time and is serious or catastrophic, right? Like this is stuff that you have to do and train and resource every single time, and you can't let slip. And then you've got another kind of category here of stuff that's like, yeah, it's pretty bad if it happens. And it does happen sometimes, but maybe not all the time, of stuff that, maybe you've got to train this often, or maybe you've got to refresh it, or you've got to at least touch on it before you go out. And then you've got these other things that are kind of floating out here that are super sexy and super fun to train on. But in this scenario that we laid out, you can kind of accept the risk of not putting the resources, not putting the effort towards these couple of categories, right? Does this kind of like make sense for everybody on how I set it up, where you've got this really hot, really passionate room, in my case of Green Berets, in your case of a founding team or an investment team or founders and advisors or founders and investors talking about where they want to focus and talking about where they want to put their limited resources next? Just give me a little kind of like a thumbs up if you're kind of picking up what I'm putting down here.
Yeah. Yeah. The example that I think, like the analogy and the crossover, is that military teams overthink shooting, and then startup teams overthink the product, and they aren't talking to their customers. And that's through like communication and moving stuff, the stuff that's less flashy and sexy, but you got to do it. And it should be involved with every journey, but a lot of teams wait and don't do it appropriately. So that's what comes to mind, Sal, when you talk about this here.
Yeah, Sal. I mean, this is fucking awesome. But like, kind of to your point, Jake, like, again, when we start our companies, we think of that initial idea and we're like, we're going to be $1 billion. We're going to do this. We're going to partner with Nike. That's like the 5 and the 4. It's like, that might never happen. And if it doesn't happen, you're probably going to be fine. But like, that never happens. But that's all we think about as founders, because we're trying to think so high, versus, is our product good? Can people afford it? And does it get in front of people? Are the stuff that always has to happen. And if you don't do it, it's catastrophic. Like, that's how I saw this. Hopefully I read that right. But yeah, dude, this is awesome.
Yeah, 100%. So what I was going to do next is I was going to basically erase shoot, move, communicate, right? And then, I mean, you guys have already been throwing them out, but I was going to kind of ask the room, right? Like, hey, what's shoot? What's super sexy? In my opinion, that's, yo, dude, let's go raise $1 million, right? How sexy is let's go raise $1 million? I think everybody can agree that is super fun to go out and, go to the, cool events and meet the cool people and hobnob and all that fun stuff, right? That's a sexy thing. At some points in your development journey as a founder, that is going to be critical, and you do need to dedicate resources to that. But maybe you're not there at this present moment in time. And this is just a tool when you do have a small team who's passionate about this stuff to kind of lock in, disagree together, and commit to what's next and what's moving forward, which is like universally good leadership advice. So, right, you've got Raise, you've probably got Sell, you've probably got, I don't know what you want to call it, maybe develop, right? Like make your tech better, versus, hey, you've got the MVP, go get reps, right? What's some other stuff? Throw it out there.
There should be something about like customer stuff, like if you're not
go
actually
to
talking to
market,
them.
like live.
Hey, go to market, like talking to customers. That really goes in with dev for number 3.
Yeah. Or what's one that I see all the time that like I'm kind of a fan of, but sometimes I'm kind of not, right? Like, hey, let's go out and like go to the movies together as a founding team, or like, buy cool swag, or like get dope t-shirts or whatever it is, right? Like, I'm not saying that culture is not important. I'm just saying like these are examples of things that like you maybe put the cart before the horse, or get distracted by, some kind of award or, recognition. Like I want to be on the Inc. 5000 or whatever it happens to be. Right. And you can kind of play with this yourself with whatever like team you're on or individually. And it works kind of the same, right? You could say, you could take this all out and you could say, hey, I really want to get in shape, and I really want to, save a bunch of money, and I'm really excited about this project that I'm working on, and then I've got my big fancy W-2 job that's got a big thing going on, and I don't know, like, hey, there's this girl that I like, and I happen to be married to her, so I really got to make sure I put some time and money into that, right? Like, whatever you want to call it. And you could plot this like in a variety of ways. And I would be lying if I told you that my mentor, who is an absolutely incredible guy, his name's Curtis Price, who taught me this exact tool, hadn't used it as much in normal life as he did in a military context or in his really incredible nonprofit work. So yeah, Jake, man, that's pretty much all I got with respect to this. I hope it was a kind of a fun, interesting tool to play around with. It's definitely not something that you're going to find when you Google like, military problem solving. This is kind of a you had to be there kind of a thing, and I'm glad I got the opportunity to share it with you guys.
Awesome stuff, Sal. I got a SportsTech idea for you out of this frequency impact matrix, which is you could use this matrix to design how to structure team practices. Which scenarios? So think about like baseball, right, or football, right? Like which plays are more likely, scenarios are more likely to come up in a game and have the greatest impact on winning or losing, and then figure out based on plotting all those plays. We have limited practice time. Where should we be spending most of our time practicing? Right. You could design that for whatever sport.
Yeah, 100%, especially in those like tight weeks where you got the school day off on Monday, like whoever's got a football game next Friday. I feel bad for those coaches for sure.
Well, I know like baseball, like they do all, a lot of times you'll train certain things in spring training and never train them again because you have the limited practice time during the season. And so you have, to your point, those limited windows, you design your practices differently.
Yeah. It's certainly something like I use this tool a lot in my after action review, right? My postmortems, especially for like certification or validation type training events, to lay out like, hey, what did we do well? What did we do poorly? And if you take those circles and you replace them with kind of a triangle going up, a triangle going down, or like a line or just a circle for neutral, you can also kind of see this other view of it. Let me just go back to it, right? Right. You can see this other view of it where like, hey, this was one down here, but we're shit hot at it. And this is 3 over here, but we stink at it. So now 1, even though it's the most, frequent and most catastrophic, your skills are so high that the stuff that you self-evaluated, this is really, this is more on a maintenance type of thing where, as long as you hit it, you can dedicate more limited resources than maybe you traditionally would throw at it because of how important a initiative it is. But this thing that's, you've got down, like this might be like, hey, we need to retrain, right? Like, we need to look at our standard operating procedures, hey, we need to maybe, put some sort of regulation or, internal administrative thing or some sort of job aid, right? Like whatever it happens to be. Right now, I'm kind of like hopping back and forth between operational business and military context in this scenario, but you could see how, and if I don't know, maybe 2 is neutral, right? Just a circle, hey, we're gonna train number 1 very little. We're gonna maybe do a walkthrough, talk through. We're gonna do, no kit, like if it's football practice, like, hey, we're just gonna do, helmets and shoulder pads, or just helmets or no pads, and if it's, this down arrow, dude, that's like, full battle rattle. Let's do it. We're going to go by the numbers. We're going to really make sure that we get on the same page about this, because this is a critical thing at this point in our journey, whatever that happens to be, or for this event that we're preparing for.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I love the idea, Jake. And there's even, I'm sure your brain's moving over there with coach tools, Justin, because, this would dovetail really nicely with what you do and the reports on how their players are doing and then where they can improve. I don't know if you have any comments there. And welcome, Lily. I'll ask you a question in a second. But yeah, you have any thoughts, Justin?
Yeah. And Jake, I thought that was a great point you made about the practice plans and thinking about play calls and prioritizing. But just to go off of what Sal was saying, like, I think, yeah, I mean, there's a lot in the sports world that I think coaches could definitely use when it comes to play calling, but structuring practice and even like figuring out what players to maybe like play and like which players are good and get in certain scenarios. So yeah, thanks for sharing, Sal.
Yeah, this is really, really cool. And with Athletify, we've been around for 2 years. We've been very serious for about 1. We've been funded for 1. We're post MVP. We have pilot teams, and we're doing all these things right now. And I worry, Sal, about spending time where we shouldn't. And we probably should do this exercise where we're like building all these sales strategies. We're not even there yet. And this is like a good reminder for our journey right now too. So cool stuff. Welcome, Lily. Thanks for joining. We just heard about a little bit of a, I don't know, how do I summarize this? Kind of like an operational way to
priority management.
Yeah. What would you call it, Ari?
Priority management.
Yeah, it's exactly what it was, with like a military blend with expertise in there. So welcome. Are you joining from like Profluence group or Meetup or?
I am. Yeah, I heard about this
cool.
through Profluence. Yeah, new to the group, but Andrew and Scott and the guys running it are friends. So excited to be there. And yeah, just interested in meeting new people. And I'm sorry to join a little late if I am late, but happy to be.
You're good. We've done these for a couple months now, and people have come and gone. Some people are new, and some people have been to a couple. So yeah, it's totally fine. And I think we're like 100% Profluence room. So yeah, welcome. Justin and I started organizing this like a couple days after Scott and Andrew and the Profluence guys launched Profluence Plus, and then they've come to some of the meetups in the past, and we kind of like do things together. So the communities are blended somehow. It's interesting, and definitely a huge supporter there. So welcome. Curious to ask what you're working on or what brought you to sports tech communities of the world. What are you up to?
Sure. So admittedly, not necessarily in the sports sector myself, but I'm a mental performance coach for executives and founders. My background was first in really rapid growth startups, and then I ran some research programs in big tech around building incredible workplace experiences and innovation. But a couple of years ago, went off on my own, really after years of being a huge psych nerd and just having a really long personal history of understanding the sort of mental and analytical traps that I saw myself getting stuck in that really held me back. Everything of self-sabotage related from indecision, perfectionism, different insecurities when making confident decisions, people pleasing. I mean, you name it. But having worked with as like sort of a right hand to founders for many years in my startup world, like I really realized as the person in charge of culture that so much of it trickled down from their own sort of internal worlds. And now it really help people who are very analytical and moving through different seasons of business to move through wherever those mental, okay, great, thumbs up. Whatever those mental blocks are, so they can become really confident, intuitive decision makers and sort of meet every moment as it comes and have not only a very stable internal world in the process, but create company culture that is a real competitive edge. So that brings me here, just hanging out with founders, getting to know what you guys are doing. The industries are all over the place, but yeah, I think growth stage founders, investors, executives of all kinds are my people.
Yeah, very cool. You definitely have some sports tech builders, mentors, people who've built massive communities around sports. Definitely have some people in the room. And the Profluence group, we were talking about that at the kickoff of this, but it alone is such an unbelievable resource. You got people from all over the world doing all different things, service providers, builders, investors. So yeah, you've come to the right place. Is there like are you working with sports companies? I'm trying to think about like how we can connect you or help you. Are there certain types of organizations that you're trying to be more linked to?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think right now a lot of my business is one-on-one and working sort of long-term with founders of whatever it may be, communities, different businesses, even like serial entrepreneurs or investors. So it's pretty broad. But I think the way that my business really grows, obviously, is sharing. I mean, I'll send my socials and all of that, where I share a lot of sort of insight and perspective on how I solve the problems that I do. But what I love doing is also like speaking events and podcasts and things like that when it comes to mental performance, leadership development. But I really take it from an angle of like the alliance between the analytical and the feeling brain and helping people maximize that intuitive decision making to become really incredible leaders from the inside out. So if you got any people where it'd be a great platform or would benefit either the people they invest in, the groups that they lead, or the audiences that they serve, I'm more than happy to talk about it. I can share, but that's sort of my elevator pitch.
Very cool. Yeah, no, there's definitely an interesting blend there, especially like in, we'll keep it in the sports industry conversation. It makes me think of, I met this guy, he was trying to do a TEDx talk on this. I was a TEDx organizer at the time, and he worked with golf coaches and like pro athletes in the golf circuit. And he wrote a series of books all about flow state and this like intersection of not being too analytical, but like this nice blend of like the science and actually the feels part. It's very interesting. I think my point is, I think a little bit more of that attitude and mindset is more absorbed into the sports world. I think people are looking for sort of that like extra, they got enough analytics, right? It's like, what else are we 100%. Missing? So yeah, it could be a cool topic to learn more about for the group here or something like that.
Yeah,
so maybe we should chat more about it.
Yeah, definitely. I wish I could stay super long tonight, but wanted to pop on and get to know you guys and see what was going on. But yeah, would be happy to talk through it. It's really interesting, sort of. I've learned a lot about sort of positioning and branding just in building the business in the last couple of years. And it's interesting, like the problems when you speak to them, it's sort of the consciousness that you're meeting people out of like, oh, okay, they wake up and they're like, I'm dealing with indecision or I'm dealing with this. So you speak more about that. But when you really get into it, unlocking something like intuition, it's an innate skill that we all have, but it's more so why it gets buried. And that's sort of the work that I do of helping them get through really like the fear-based ways of operating that keep them so much on the analytical side that like intuitive confidence gets really squished. And as you're dealing with founders or even athletes, I mean, that are getting to a new level where their environment is now different, they're dealing with a lot of uncertainty. And as you get higher and higher, that room for like perceived inadequacy is so little, and it really pushes us into that fear-based way of operating. So helping people find sort of like a internal locus of control, even when outside circumstances are a little crazy or unpredictable. So yeah, we'll definitely connect. I can send you a million different ways the conversation could go, but the nice thing is that it can be really tailored to different audiences, whether it be people investing in sports, athletes, people just in the community, but conscious leaders in general are my people. So we love that.
Yeah, I'd love to learn more, and then we can circulate it within the group. And Yeah, it's very interesting. I find that in like traditional startup communities, when they are lost and they're afraid and all that fear, what they do is they just build in the wrong direction. Whereas I think sports founders are a little bit more of like stereotypical entrepreneurs versus not just being a programmer. And they do cry for help. They do look for more resources. So yeah, it's very, very interesting. I definitely am excited to learn more. So thanks for sharing.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Anybody have any like other thoughts? Jake, you had a really good idea. Getting back to like, want to have a little bit more dialogue about Sal's presentation, or maybe some more ideas or examples, kind of like what Jake brought up about like the training component, or if
Well, Sal, I had a couple questions, if that's okay. So you said, I mean, as I maybe too simply put it, but what I saw it as is a priority management tool. It's like, all right, we got all these different things that we can do. What do we prioritize? You kind of mentioned like you've got 5 experts on your team that are all like dope at their craft of guns and movement and communicating, whatever. And then as a team, you're like, all right, well, these things are the most important, so we're going to buy in. What do you tell the shooter guy who's 5th on the list? He's like, well, you can just kind of sit in the corner and, twiddle your thumbs, or like, what does that guy do? Or is he helping with the communications? And then how do we use that military analogy to go into a business where, you're not telling HR to work on sales just because that's the priority?
Yeah. It's something I alluded to while I was talking a little bit, and is important to know is like, this is a living document. This is not a canon, right? This is not something that doesn't change, right? So, and this tool is intended for literally exactly that, right? Where like, especially if it's an extra passionate, extra opinionated teammate on XYZ, maybe in business it's like a regulatory guy or something like that, right? To allow that dude to voice all of his concerns, and then allow the team to make sure everybody's kind of got it, and the decision, everybody can buy in because everybody put in. And then ultimately, there's going to be some fights in the team room, right? It's going to happen. And the unique part, at least about a special forces team, and this is true with most military units, all those specialists, way, way, way more technical and experienced than me. The team I led had maybe like 100 combined years in the special operations community. And I got there like right out of the schoolhouse and was in charge, right? So that's just kind of a unique thing that happens in the military. But this is a tool for me to allow, one, my technical experts to voice their opinion and voice their concerns. And 2, for me to kind of like establish how the team is going to make decisions in this moment and be real confident that I know that I have balanced getting the right perspectives with putting it in a format where my guys could commit, even if they weren't happy about it at the time and didn't necessarily perfectly agree, but they got a chance to say their piece. They know that they were heard. They know that they were valued, and we moved forward as a team.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Thanks.
I could see that example, actually, that like military example crossing into SportsTech foundership, because oftentimes you do have a young founder who doesn't have engineering expertise, doesn't have legal, doesn't even know how to like do all the initial deck building. Like, what's the journey to even start to think about product market fit? They might be sourcing all these experts, just like you're in this situation where you're actually at the centerpiece and you're supposed to be founder of this new thing with all these people who have very deep technical expertise around you, but you're still orchestrating, you're the director. So I think there might be a little bit more crossover, or at least that's what I was thinking about when you were saying that, Sal. So
yeah,
good example.
Yeah, it's a good way to like shape your own perspective too, because right, like if you're the boss, man. Like, you got to be the boss. It's part of the team. And although maybe I can't think of like a very specific example right off the top of my head, maybe like some partnership training in West Africa comes to mind. Like, all my guys were not good at speaking French, and I pushed speaking French hard because I knew that like they didn't need to be good. They just need to make it seem like they really put in some genuine effort, and we're trying to like empathetically build relationships with the people that we were partnered with and that we were living with and dependent on for our physical security, right? So, it there was certainly some heated debates on nobody gives a shit if, we can speak French and there's a waiver for the language test requirement right now and yada, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, when you use a tool like that, it's a way also for like you to kind of put out your high level like guidance, so like your left and right limits, if you will, for the energy of the team to focus everybody on whatever we're focusing on in this period of time.
Super interesting example. It makes me want to hear more stories. You brought up West Africa last time I was around you, and
I love West Africa, man.
Yeah, that's wild. Did you find so? What I'm curious now. You sound like you were one of the guys who did learn French.
Yeah, I speak it at a professional working level, or
Yeah,
at least I did when I was there every day.
What percentage of other people were doing it? Like 5%, 1%?
So there is a minimum standard requirement. The minimum standard requirement is like, I would call that like survival foreign language, right? Like left, right, stop, go, yes, no, please, thank you.
Yeah.
I need to go here, and then the higher level is like, more like, like for example, I gave a public address that was on the news for, the ambassador, the secretary of defense, and the senior general of that country, but it was in French. And they're like, do you want a translator? I was like, hell no. Right. Like, because I wanted it to look, even if I didn't get it right. And I rehearsed a lot for that, but like, I wanted it to seem as close as possible. Like I put in the effort because I knew that address was going to go much farther than the, 100 or so people that were in the room.
Yeah, it's really cool. My main takeaway is like, what are the things in the boardroom that your team is overlooking that they need to be talking about? A little bit of this is kind of like a visual way of doing a SWOT analysis, right? Like, what are the things that could happen? What are the things that, if it does, what does that look like? So yeah, it's really interesting. Good examples. It's all good, Jake. Thanks for joining. Cool. Anybody else have any ideas or insights or trends they want to talk about? We usually talk about like industry trends or wins or anything else.
No, Sal, I just wanted to say thanks again. Like, definitely learned a lot, and especially like when Jacob mentioned the sports analogy, I was thinking about how I could use this in like reporting. But the other cool thing about it too is like just thinking about it because it's just myself and my co-founder, how we could like prioritize what we were like, how we're making decisions. So yeah, no, I thought it was great.
Yeah, you could overdo it for sure, but like, it's easy in the military because it's all, regulation that somebody else thought up. But if you take it in an entrepreneurial context of like the 12-week year or EOS or, any of those kind of like business operations frameworks that I generally use because like they're very, very similar to the military frameworks. This would be something that I'd whip out at like, I don't know, like a quarterly basis or if a significant milestone had been passed, right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, now that we're pretty sure we have MVP, let's, take the afternoon and refocus.
Whole fresh perspective. And we've just literally crossed into that paradigm. And now we're getting into all these things. Like we're in that exact example that you just talked about, where it's like a whole new thinking. It's like, we got to do this, got to do that. And we're putting resources where we shouldn't yet. But yeah, great ideas. Great presentation, Sal. Thanks for joining, Lily. And yeah, cool stuff. We'll have to the three of us are in the Philadelphia area, so we were all together a couple weeks ago for an in-person meetup. So we'll see you.
Lily and I were hanging out in the Hamptons not too long
I know I was gonna be like, I recognize you, I know you.
All right, cool. So
I know. I'm also realizing that I thought it was 6 p.m. I'm Central Time, and I realized that you said Eastern Time. So I'm like, okay, no wonder we made presentation by the time I joined.
Yeah, when you popped in right at 7, I was like, man, I was worried. Yeah, I knew there was that. By the way,
you were presenting, and I was like, damn, you guys got started quickly. I'm like, okay, got it, time zone thing.
You're good.
Cool. No, I'm down in Austin, but those future events, I'm definitely trying to make it to. There's the one in London coming up that it's going to be a last minute call. I'm hoping to, but if anyone's ever down in Austin, let me know. And I'm from New York, so if I'm ever on the East Coast, I'll let you guys know. I'd love to be part of something in person. But what's the best way to keep in touch with the regular meetings you guys do?
So if you want to drop like your email and LinkedIn in the chat, I usually copy that after a whole meetup. And then whenever we do stuff, I email people directly. And then we have a Slack group. There's a meetup page where things get posted there. So there's a couple different ways. We even post about it in Profluent. So we make it hard. We make it hard to miss, now that you're plugged in. So
perfect.
It's cool. I heard about that London thing. Profluent has
Yeah.
a lot of stuff going on.
Sweet.
And then, so this is all cool. So happy to be connected. Want to learn more about what you're up to. It sounds like an interesting sweet spot to do consulting. I guess you do consulting with startup teams, right?
I have. It really is more so right now on like the one-on-one side of things, but it's something that, especially if you do it with like a leadership team at large, and you can really find areas in which maybe like one person, it's interesting talking to like a larger leadership team altogether to make sure like if there's any pitfalls that everyone's falling into or any lack of alignment, you can sort of figure that out. But yeah, I can also send you, we have our Profluence chat like in the group or the app or whatever going on. I could send you a link to my calendar or something if you want to connect and just kind of nail it on like, okay, because there's so many different angles that we could take it in. Like what would be the most beneficial for this kind of group or the people that you serve. And I could talk about it forever. So that'd be great.
Cool. Yeah, we'll chat more for sure. Yeah, thanks for joining.
Yeah, excited to be here.